really wanted me to do the survey results, and I think some other people. Yeah, the recording has started, so I can go now. And so Daniel, I said to Daniel, and I said to everyone, I was meant to be doing the survey results last time, and I completely forgot. And thank you for Daniel for reminding me actually. So I prepared the results for this round. And I will go through the agenda quickly first. I will bring this the next community call. So if everyone doesn't know yet, we now have the dsccommunity.org website, and then we try to keep information there. So you've got notes from the previous ones. And today, I don't know if I will do the demo because that's a lot of things, but I want definitely to go through all the results of the DSC survey that Michael started in June. So we left, I think it was during PSConf EU, we started to gather information about the DSC, and you will see the questions and the answers we got, and what happened since then. And then we have topics that we really want to discuss. Is we need more maintainers for the DSC resource, and then we need to find how. So we'll discuss that in a bit. And then if there's anything you want to bring up, feel free to do it. And obviously we go through the resources to be released. Probably, yeah. So because there's a lot of things to cover, and I'm pretty sure 1 hour is not going to be enough to cover everything today. I want to start with the DSC survey first. So then we'll show we clear that, and after that we will talk quickly about the resource to be released if there's anything, and then we'll carry on with the other topics. So the survey result first. So yes, in June the survey started. I don't know if you've seen it. There was not that much advertisement around it, but we had 300 and something responses. And the idea was really asking, okay, what's your usage of DSC? What do you think about DSC? And asking a bit more about the features and things. It's not a big survey. It was very informative, and a lot of people had a lot of passion to share with it. And I want to show you so what data we gathered and some of the things that happened since then. So it's a lot of it is there's obviously the survey, the results, and a lot of it is my opinion. So I work for Microsoft these days, but a lot of the analysis and the comments I will make is not necessarily the ones from Microsoft. It can be just my opinion. So feel free to share and make sure that if you have any question, just ask me, and maybe we can ask Michael's position, or I can give you my point of view as well. So the first thing is how many people were using DSC, and this is the results we have. So for a lot of people, still I would say there's a good percentage of people not really using DSC in production that have answered this. So that means there's interest also from the people, I would say probably in the PowerShell community, to see what's going on with DSC, but they're not using it actively yet. And that will show, and we will discuss in a bit, that will show that some people are just waiting to see how DSC is evolving, and before they invest time. So we'll get back to this at the end as well. How many nodes do you manage? I was actually surprised to see a fair range of people between managing very few to many nodes. And this is the numbers we got. And I'm familiar with setups around in the green area, so where you've got more or you can have more than few hundreds to a few thousands nodes. I was surprised to see some of them are more than 10,000. Obviously not that many, but not that many have got such huge infrastructure. So yeah, if you have any questions, just stop me as well. Can you use a cloud service? So this question, I've had quite a few feedbacks offline, because some people say, yes, I can use a cloud service. It doesn't necessarily has to be Azure. So that was one of the arguments some people have said. But in general, there's a good split of people just not being able to use any cloud service at all, which is interesting. And if you'd have asked the question a year earlier, I'm pretty sure the I would say a good proportion would be like we would be definitely in the orange zone, not the blue zone. But I think that's changing, and then I don't want to make too many analysis on this, but it would be very interesting to ask the same questions in another 6 months to 1 year and see how this evolves. And if you have questions in the chat window, someone just bring it to me so then I can see it, because I don't have the chat window up. And then that was an interesting question. Michael put in is rank the feature from the highest to lowest priority that you'd like to see. And definitely the top answer, the first choice, was to have invoke DSC resource in PS Core. And so it's interesting. So since then you probably know that PowerShell 7 will most likely have invoke DSC resource working on PowerShell Core cross-platform, and this has been released since preview 4, so PowerShell 7 preview 4. So you can already play with it if you install preview 4, preview 5, and you can start playing with this. Support for maintenance window. So this one, I will get into more details in a bit, but then obviously people are asking for support for maintenance window, real-time status information, dependencies across PowerShell. I found that one interesting. Dependencies across PowerShell configuration, so it's easier for teams to express dependencies. I'm interested to see that many people care about PowerShells. I personally have opinions, but Daniel can give his other opinion, because I know Daniel is using PowerShell heavily. And GMSA credentials used to be okay. GMSA credentials. So that is currently, we implement it on a per resource basis. And there's a lot of ideas and questions around how to better handle credentials. On that actually goes even to the PowerShell as the language. And this is also why there's an RFC around it. And I will get back to this in a bit. And then some people have asked, which I found surprising to some extent, so solution for DSC to manage group policy settings, so conflicts are avoided and managed settings can be grayed out in the UI. I find this surprising because many people know that having DSC and group policy together is probably not a good idea. I think Jeffrey Snover's got a very good quote, which is they will fight like two raccoons in a bag. So that's definitely something you want to avoid. And it's true that it would be good to reflect it into the maybe the GPO's GUI. But my advice would be just don't even try to make change if you manage some things with DSC. So it would be kind of hard to have infrastructure as code taking over like I would say the GUI side of policies and stuff. And then latest is service-side in Azure networking, so traffic to the service doesn't require leaving a private virtual network. I think that's a very specific use case. So getting back into some of the details, I said, so the top feature request, I think it's pretty good because that's really been addressed by by Microsoft with the PowerShell team and the DSC team. So it's coming to PowerShell 7. It's been there since preview 4. You can already play with the implementation. There are limitations, definitely, and that's something which is, so I've worked with Microsoft and partners, so Chef, Ansible, Puppet. Actually, I would already also talk to VMware and some other people to make sure we do the minimum and we do the minimum right. before we actually implement more of the features, and there are challenges. One of the challenges of the subtype implementation. So in DSC, when you have, let's say, a MUFFY-based resource, it's sometimes you have a subtype. So you have your basic MUFFY, and then one of the properties of that DSC resource is another object, and you define it within your MUFFY document. So that's what I call a subtype. I think it's also called like an embedded type. But that's the idea where, let's say if you want to have a Nash table, then that's going to be a SIM instance. And this is the way it's translated using SIM. So some example, I think the X-Web administration has one resource, which is really using a big subtype. So that's the type of, this is one of the limitations, because you need to use SIM to return, like this, a SIM instance to return the subtype of your get DSC resource, or to pass it as a parameter when you do invoke DSC resource in 5.1. And this is currently not going to be supported, and the main reason is the SIM commandlets are not supported on Linux. So that's definitely one of the limitations. So new SIM instance, which is part of the SIM commandlets, exists on PowerShell from 6.0 to 7, but only on Windows, not on Linux. So we can't have exactly the same experience between PowerShell 7, Linux, Windows. So we said, okay, it's going to be a problem for this implementation. We're not going to support this, but we get everything working the same ways on Linux as on Windows for the implementation we're doing to start with. There's no PS DSC run as credential support built in. And the challenge there is the way impersonation works on Windows and on Linux is very different. And as an example, in Linux, to put it simply, you need to have a new process to run as a different user. So what does that mean is, if you want to run something as a given credential, then it needs to be a new process. So it needs to be like a start job, like a PowerShell job. And that is not very efficient in terms of code, like it's a bit slower. But in Windows, you have different ways of doing impersonation. So that would mean the implementation would have different behavior, and we wanted to avoid that for the basics. So that's something we're probably going to wrap around the existing invoke DSC resource for PowerShell 7, and then we can have an invoke DSC resource and then that can provide maybe 2 ways of doing it. But we thought that should not be part of this RFC for now. So there's a few details like this. There's also challenges to retrieve the information about the types of the properties. Like this needs to be documented, but if you look at the RFC, you can see like we already discussed quite a few of the things. There's a lot of comments around this. So we have a good idea of how to provide this. We need to improve the documentation. And as a first step, this is already covering a lot of the scenarios. And the same way on Windows, the same behavior on Windows and on Linux. Maintenance windows. So that's pretty cool, because maintenance window has been a big ask. And Raymond Andre, who's a consultant for Microsoft, actually was doing some work on the maintenance windows. And I told him, well, you have to blog about it because no one knows. So it's a big ask, but actually you can do something similar to maintenance windows by using a custom resource and like a composite resource as well. So definitely have a look at his blog. It's on the DSC community in the blog area. And that should probably help many people to implement a maintenance window using DSC without the need for any, I would say that, like it doesn't need a new LCM or new features in the LCM. You can work around it with the existing LCM in 5.1. So definitely have a look at this article. A very interesting implementation. And if you need anything, it's open source, so you can also add some features if needed. A real-time status information. So, sorry, I just need to bring that one up because I can't remember. Sorry, it's a bit early for me here. Bear with me. what was the full? Okay, that's 3.1. So real-time status information. So it's easier to understand long-running configuration. So sometimes, yeah, it's hard to troubleshoot what's going on in a configuration, and you need to see, okay, where it's at now, and you don't want to wait for the LCM to report the status, because it does that at the very end of the run of the DSC configuration run. So you want to see, okay, where it's at now, why is it taking so long, why it hasn't reported. And actually, most of the time, you actually need to look in the log, and you can use the Windows event log to see what it's doing and where it's at. And this is why the second blog is actually very good from Yurek, which is about how to use the DSC logging. So I thought that was answering pretty much the question. It doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes you want to have it in a different ways. Like, it would be better if it was surfaced, but that would mean the LCM would need to change the way it works. And that's definitely not going to happen in v5.1, because, as you know, the WMF framework is not going to get any major update, just security fixes. So in the meantime, if you're using DSC, if you're using DSC in the pool, on the pool mode as an example, well, you definitely have to look at DSC logging and the event log to find this kind of information. So it's not completely a fix, but at least you can, if you use logging, you will have a better way of finding this information. So the other points, depends across partials, store configuration JSON. I would say partials aren't the answer. What was the question again? My point is, some people trying to do things the partials are not really meant to be doing, and that is when they want one partial to be handled by one team, on another partial being handled by another team, and they don't want these two teams to work together. So that's, in my opinion, this is usually the wrong scenario. That this is not the way you should be doing to be successful, because then if one team is handling, let's say, one configuration of Windows, and another team another configuration, the same configuration, which one will take over? And they want to have a complex system of saying, well, if it's that team, it should be able to take over this other team. Technically, that's something you should handle yourself. And I'm definitely not a big fan of partials, but I know Daniel Barth, who's on the call, actually use it, and he uses it successfully, because they manage those kind of things before it actually gets to the node. So the people using partials successfully don't even do this. They don't really manage credentials. Don't tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you should make sure you test even your different partials before it gets to your node.
Yeah, indeed. And I think also how to be successful with partials is that you work from one intent source.
Exactly.
So all the teams commit to one Git repo, and that is what gets distributed to your hosts. And if you're going to split up that, yeah, they will just fight. And
yeah, I've had questions from someone. So that is an ISV scenario where they want to manage some configurations for their customers, and then they want to let the customers manage some of the bits of the configurations. So they provide, let's say, the base OS configuration, and they want to let their customers to churn anything else. Well, if you are both admins on the system, you should definitely talk to it, and that should converge, as you said, with one source of intent. Trying to have two sources of intent, not to overlap, just never works. So, like, it's very difficult. So it's better for them to see exactly what you configure, so then they don't change it. And then you change the source of intent, but not just too late on the configuration. All right. So yeah, so one of the other ask was to store the configuration. So once the MUFFY is compiled, so the compiled of the configuration, to change this to JSON or something else. So I think changing from MUFF to JSON just by itself is not really the solution. Well, it's not the problem, because the problem is just to have a nicer format to manage. there's ways, and obviously that should be better documented. I tweeted about this, and I think Ryan Bartram also tweeted about this a few weeks ago. But you have a class which helps you parsing the MUFF, and you can just pass the MUFF with just one call, and that just returns you an object, and you can see everything about your MUFF. So it's not about just changing the format. It's about getting access to the in-memory information, so the resource graph that is built during compilation. That's what we really want. But to do this, we need to hook into the compilation process. And at the moment, this is not possible, or at least not easily possible. And that's something definitely should be improved, but that will take some time. So that's between the PowerShell parsing features, and then the PS desired state configuration.psm1 module, which is actually doing the write to MUFF function. So when you have it in memory, it just writes the MUFF files of your compilation process for your configuration. So that's definitely something at least I know, and I've asked, and then I definitely hope at some point, and we're discussing this, but at some point I hope that will be more easily accessible, because that's very important for everyone using DSC heavily. GMSA credentials. So GMSA credentials implemented per resource at the moment, as I said, but having something which would be built in the system would be good. So the problem is, as I said, WMF 5.1 is not going to move, so it's not going to happen there. But by the invoke DSC resource in PS7, that could allow a community LCM or something similar. And by that, I mean, if we have an invoke DSC resource which works with platform and is open source, what the LCM actually does is not that specific. So we could have at least the implementation of what the current LCM does in a module, and then we could leverage some other things. So as an example, well, you have a credential. How do you use that credential? And some of the RFC in PowerShell 7, if you've looked at the PowerShell RFCs, there's one about leveraging credentials from a credential store directly within PowerShell. So that could be leveraged by whatever we do with PS7, PowerShell 7. That's a bit complicated. The best is if you have questions around this, just grab me at some point on the Slack channel, and then I can give you a bit more details and maybe jump on a call, and then I can share my thinking around this. And GPO and DSC, yeah, so the GPO and DSC, so yeah, there will be lecture records in the bag. GPP, I think GPP would be nicer, because that's something DSC doesn't support, because it doesn't run on the user context at the moment. Well, with the invoke DSC resource in PowerShell 7, actually it can run in the user context. So you could use, as an example, as a rough ID, you could use invoke DSC resource from, I don't know, a logon script or something to manage some GPP. So group policy preferences or things like this. And service technology networking, yeah, I don't have any argument. That sounds like a good idea, but then that's also a very specific use case. So yeah, I have just an opinion around this one. So besides that, there was an open question at the end, which is, other than the features listed above, what's your top task for DSC? So I'm not going to share all the responses we had, because that's open and then that's relatively private. There's just a few ones I wanted to highlight. And some of them are interesting. Some of them are, you will see. So DSC should have a future. So the first question when I see this is, okay, what do you actually mean by DSC? So DSC is different things. DSC is the LCM, the different technologies that the LCM implements. So you've got the pull server, which is one part. You've got the LCM, which is another part. And then you've got what the LCM does. So not the service, but the feature that the service leverages, which is using the DSC ecosystem, like the DSC resources that we really care about. So like there's different element, and when you decompose them and you understand what do you really mean by DSC, definitely DSC as a future, and I think we started to prove that. But if we haven't, then let us know how and why. The point is, have you seen what guest configuration, so Azure policy guest configuration is about? That is leveraging DSC, and then this is already used, and there's a lot of things going on. And I would say, if you don't know enough, I'm pretty sure Michael's going to cover some of them during Ignite. So maybe just follow Ignite, and then you will see more information about this. And there's already, like, he also wrote like very nice blog posts. I should link them back. It's actually with detailing and explaining what it is and how it uses DSC. So if you think like DSC should have a future and that is not obvious now, so tell us why it's not obvious, because I'm really curious about what else do we need to prove to make it obvious. And so yeah, it might not be, so maybe the future doesn't really solve your problem. So then that's another thing. And that's fine, but DSC as a technology, I think definitely has a future. DSC as a configuration management solution, that was never its intent. And that's something I believe people want to be clear. But this is also why DSC and the current efforts is really about working with I have no sound feedback, so I'm not even sure I'm still on the call. I'll just keep talking. That's okay.
You are. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. It's just sometimes like, okay, am I still working? So sorry, I got lost a bit. So definitely, yeah. If we're not answering the question, if you believe DSC doesn't seem to have a future, let us know. But we're definitely working, especially for the Invoke DSC resource. We've been working on talking with third parties to say, okay, how can we best help you leveraging DSC as a technology, the DSC resources and things like this. And that's really the intent. It's not about creating an alternative configuration management solution. It's being able to solve the problem of configuring using the DSC ecosystem. And if someone wants to build their own solution, then they can do it with that platform if you want. You want to say?
Yeah, I think what would really make it obvious that it has a future, if that, well, new things coming from Microsoft have their own DSC resource when they go GA.
Yeah, so that's a big, that's actually a very good point, and I should have added it. So that's the way it works, and this is my personal opinion, so sorry for that. But if you want Microsoft product groups to have a DSC interface to configure their products, you should talk to the product groups. And the problem is, if you, and that's what the expectation has been, and this is what one of the downside of the PowerShell team initially to start the effort of creating the DSC resource and everything, people started to assume that the DSC team should own the DSC resources. Actually, it should probably not be. It's good for them to provide guidance to help, but it's not for them to write the resource to, say, configure the SQL server, as an example. So definitely what these teams, the product teams, needs to have is feedback from their customer to say, well, to configure your software, I really want the DSC resource. And I think us as the DSC community is we have a role in there, which is, okay, this is the community resource, and we should all get back to the product team saying, why are you not investing time and effort to that DSC resource, which is done by the community, which is great work. We need your support in this DSC resource. And I think that's what should happen. And the thing is, Microsoft is really driven by customer. So unless customers are actually asking for something, then it's not because another Microsoft internal team asks for it that's going to have as much value as an actual customer and customers going. So if anyone's going to Ignite, just find your product team and say, I want you to support and invest time into the DSC a DSC interface to configure products. But I agree, that would be great. We just need to remove, we should need to remove the old expectation that it should come from the DSC team. And obviously, so I asked the question when I started working with the DSC team, and they said, well, they try to, but this is also the answer they gave me, is like they try to, and this is something they're really passionate about, but it needs to be coming from the customers, which makes sense. So, yeah, so the best for the DSC to have a future is to make sure it integrates with existing solutions, and that includes guest configuration and third parties. Guest configurations leveraging DSC means there's a future for you to use in cloud governance, definitely, and then auditing and things like this. And then also Chef and Puppet Ansibles mean you can configure different workloads in a similar way. And it doesn't need to be DSC as a configuration management solutions, but that should be possible if someone wants to implement it using, for instance, the new PowerShell 7 implementation of Invoke DSC resource. So what's really important, in my opinion, is strong, independent, and active community, and being inclusive and provide value and being collaborative. And if we have a strong community, as we're trying to build, then they will have big leverage on the product groups to also ask for more. Make sense? And yeah, so some people say DSC should have a future. And one of the examples is VMware DSC. Someone asked, like, what do you want your top ask? Is VMware DSC? Well, we actually talk quite often to the VMware guys because they're really investing into DSC. And I don't know if you've seen the DSCR, which is the DSC resource for VMware, which is based on the PowerShell CLI and doing much more than just implementing the PowerShell CLI. They're doing a huge job in there, and they're really pioneering, I would say, the third parties implementation. So they're doing a really good job. And definitely, if you're using VMware, look at their things and then tell them you're doing a great work. Please do more of this. But they've been talking about it recently quite a bit, and they're doing quite a lot of progress. So definitely look at in the PowerShell conferences. There's recordings usually, and you can see VMware and the DSC that present the work they're doing. And otherwise, everything's on GitHub, which is pretty cool. And I think it's one of the first community and open source born implementation from VMware to be completely open source. So definitely have a look at this. And
they're pretty close to replacing host profiles with purely DSC, which is, in my view, a big way forward.
Yeah, so there's a like the third parties really value DSC, which I think this is very important for DSC's future. And some people have asked interoperability between other tools like Puppet, Chef, and like people don't want DSC to mess implementation with Puppet. But this is definitely not the point. We want Puppet, Chef, Ansible, and other tools to leverage DSC in the best way possible. And this is to ensure the future and the future of the platform.
Hey, Gail, this is Michael.
Yeah.
I'll sort of pile on a couple of things. With the latest preview 4 of PowerShell 7, I haven't had a chance to blog about this yet, but compilation is now working cross-platform.
Yes.
You might have to run import module PS desired state configuration. And on both Mac OS and Linux, you want to make sure that OpenSSL is installed. OpenSSL is pretty much always there on Linux, but for Mac OS, you want to use something like Brew to go install it. I've actually been doing a lot of compilations on, I requested for this laptop refresh to get a MacBook Pro so that I could experiment with this. And so I've been running all my compilations on my MacBook, and it's been going really well. I've also been trying using Linux for my builds. And I've noticed that compilation on Linux does not work really well. And that's primarily for 2 reasons. One, Linux is more firm about case sensitivity than Mac OS. And so you have to be very careful about that. Also, it looks like get DSC resource is I think the issue actually is dealing with the path, and that the path information is delimited differently between Windows and other operating systems, like PS module path and the environment variable path. So we've got a couple things to fix and get DSC resource for compilation to work well in Linux. But then we'll have a whole new scenario where you can, there'll be a new thing for DSC where we can use Linux agents for our compilations as build services. So that's pretty awesome. And then there's some things, there's definitely some things to talk about for guest configuration, but I don't want to record them and put them on YouTube. But we'll be talking all about a bunch of new things at Ignite. So I'll probably just offer stay tuned. Typically what I'll do the week of Ignite, like the week before Ignite, I'll write up a bunch of blog posts and then publish them the week of Ignite, because everybody who wants to go out and read blog posts is like really paying attention that week. But we've got a handful of new things coming that are looking really good.
I know. All right. Thanks. So maybe if we got a bit of time left at the very end, we will stop the recording and then we can share a bit more.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. That's why there's a lot of things to cover today. All right. I'll skip a bit and go a bit faster then. And so DSC should be open sourced and should work outside of Azure. That's a big, in my opinion, that's kind of big misunderstanding to some extent, or people wish to have a lot of the features from Azure, but without Azure because it's cloud, and cloud is bad in the organization at least. So technically within Invoke DSC resource, it's mostly open sourced. And when I say mostly, the main element is, as I said, for the compilation side, that would need to be, so the module Michael was talking about is PS desired state configuration.psm1, which is what is doing part of the compilation at least. And that would need to be open sourced. It's not at the moment. It's actually not because there's a wish of not being open source. It's just because it's some work and some investment to make it open source that the teams were not ready to do yet. And hopefully, we'll see later, like after Ignite and after the current workload. But hopefully, I will try to push Michael to make this happen as soon as possible. But it just wasn't possible yet. But I know the teams actually wish for this to happen. It just like, it's a bit of an effort that they couldn't make for these current RFCs at least. The LCM is not open source, but the way I see the LCM, it's an agent, like it's a service which is specifically integrated and targeted with Windows, which is fine. But if you think about the technology at large, this is a bit restrictive. So it's just not going to be open source, and there's no point being it open source because it's so specific and use WMI and all the things you don't like. So that would not really work. So the vNext LCM, as I call sometimes the part of the work that's been done before it's been repurposed for guest configuration, that's an agent which is now specifically integrated with Azure, so to serve hybrid VMs. And the idea I'm trying to share here is you can't have an Azure service without Azure. You don't have all the infrastructure that guest configuration is leveraging into your environment. Like this is something you can't just implement like this. So it just doesn't really work that way. The community, what the community really needs is decoupling the DSC technology from the services, the agent. So then if someone wants to have a service, what is a service is just the equivalent. I always, so that's something I say it's the equivalent of a scheduled task. So if you have a scheduled task that just runs something at a periodic interval, that could be the same principle as the agent. But we need to have all the features that is done and used by the service to be available to any customers that want to implement their own agent. So the idea is if you can do invoke DSC resource and you can read a MUFFY file and then you can pull some modules, like these are the components that you really need to have, and then the service itself. Maybe Puppet's going to use a different service. They're going to use their own agent. Chef's going to use their own agent. but the features that they're going to use should be shared across everyone. And that could come from the community. And, oh yeah, that's another thing we've seen. MUFFY is bad. Yes, MUFFY is bad. Okay, it's fine, we know about this, but it's not that bad. So as long as you can parse it, then MUFFY is just a way to serialize the configuration from from your DSC configurations on the DSL into something that you can pass over the network, secure, and then you can just deserialize at the other end. And so as long as you can read it and convert it, then it's not that bad. It does the job. Yeah, someone says it passes a string and converts it to a nested object. Well, that's the purpose of serialization. So MUFFY is bad, but as I said, it's not definitely the problem. The problem is we don't have any hookup points between the configuration and when it's compiled. We don't have access to the in-memory resource graph, which can be a problem. And it does the job for now. So how do you feel about MUFF-based resource? If you want to get rid of MUFF, like what should happen for MUFF-based resource? You know, because the metadata of a DSC resource is stored in the MUFF and nowhere else. So that's a big question to me. Is like with MUFF-based resource, you don't have any way to express all the information that you need. So I'm just going to skip there, like food for thought, and we can discuss that on the Slack channel. And I want the same features on premise and the cloud. I'm just not going to say too much. I already said what I think about this one is you don't have all the infrastructure that gets configuration or some of the tools are doing. So what you want is the features of the existing LCM to be able to be reproduced. And that could come from the community. And I have heard some people in the community teaming up to actually doing something like the principles, like all the a module that would have the same features of what the LCM would be using underneath. So like getting credentials, pulling some modules, and then reading a MUFF file, and then doing like using invoke DSC resource with the PowerShell 7 implementation based on that, and the invoke DSC resources. So we'll see what the community come up with as well. But if you're interested, just like make it known. Provide more functionality for disconnected services. So I'm going to skip that because I'm conscious of time. But if you have questions, maybe now's the time. So do you have any questions based on the feedback and things like this? Maybe question for Michael, who was on the call. No? No question? Fine. Someone just unmuted. Daniel, obviously.
Yeah, I thought, well, there can be nobody saying anything, but
Good.
But it was more like, I mean, I see the thing where, yeah, on premise we're never going to get what we get in the cloud, but I feel the way Microsoft plays this is like they're trying to be your mom, right? It's like, yeah, you can't have that there. You have to come here, and maybe that should be turned around, that customers actually feel, oh wait, it's something nice to get instead of a smack in the face for you can't have that. I think, well, that's a bit the problem Microsoft has with, well, not being a cloud vendor from the start, and well, probably what AWS has as an advantage, because, well, they have it more turned around, right? It's more, okay, we provide you this, you can come here, it's fine if you don't come, but on the Microsoft side, it's you get a slap in the face and you're an asshole for being on premise. Just my feeling.
Yeah, I think it's a bit unfair in ways. So I definitely understand the feeling. I think it's just unlucky that like it's two different approach. One is about,
and it's definitely unfair, right? I mean, nobody said it was fair.
Yeah, no, but the idea is like people are coming from a specific, like people who have been using DSC for since WMF 5.1 are coming from, okay, I've got my on-prem things, and then the problem is Microsoft as a big company and a provider said, well, what is the next what is the next thing where we should provide value and whether would that make sense and make sense at Microsoft scale. And for this to make sense at Microsoft scale, it's about providing value to people using the cloud, because this is where the new customers are. And in terms of this is what the customers are asking. So the DSC technology it still works with the WMF 5.1, and that's not being taken away. And then they're still trying to, and they shifted to, okay, we need to be able to manage configurations for many VMs in many ways, like something which is more integrated with Azure, because this is where the product is and this is where the strategy of Microsoft is. And now they're filling the gap in between, which is making sure the platforms works with PowerShell and PowerShell 7. There's only one PowerShell, it's PowerShell 7, remember this. So no, they're really fixing the transition and the story around there. I think it needs maturity, but I think at least it's in a good place. And then yes, it feels like there's a disconnection there, but this is like I would say, and what's unlucky, it's DSC is never meant to be a full-blown solution, right? And people expect it to go from what it was at the beginning of a platform to be a solution, but it's not really. So yeah, I feel you. Not much we can do, but we can make sure that the platform is really solid. And then I lost. I'm still on the call. Yeah, that's fine.
No, and I think you need to focus on the resources.
Yes. So okay, let's keep that. And then if we want to take this offline, we can. We had two questions. First of all, I want to bring the agenda first, and Johan and Daniel, tell me if there's anything we need to cover first for the resources. There's breaking changes.
Yeah. If you refresh that page, it actually says it's a breaking change on X-Web administration.
Yes.
Yeah.
So something to note: X-Web administration had loads of contribution. Johan can tell you about that.
Yeah, we have. I added a lot of issues for Hacktoberfest and around I don't know 35 issues or something. Mostly low-hanging fruit, so people could just contribute. I was expecting a lot of new contributors. I didn't expect that much contributors. So we got like 40 PRs in 12 days. I spent all evenings just reviewing PRs. So, but it was awesome. But it was a lot of work.
So if you had delays getting reviews, Oktoberfest definitely had an impact there. So there's a good about it, because like some resource got a good refresh, but obviously there's always the downside of more contributions means more review time needed. And actually that was you, Daniel, saying, well, we need to get more maintainers. So I said, okay, how? And we agree we need more maintainers. So we raised the question and we started discussing this on the Slack channel. How do we get more maintainers? And that's an open question for everyone in the call. Do you have ideas?
Yeah. So well, I already mentioned this on the Slack channel as well. But what I really feel, so I thought, okay, maybe I can take up a resource. I would like to take the X Remote Desktop Session Host one, because, well, nobody's giving that any love. But then I thought, okay, so how can I become a maintainer? And I think that's definitely something that should be on the DSC community website.
That's a very good idea. And you know, this is an open source website that you can contribute to. So I'm looking forward to your PR. No, mostly it's though.
So I'm going to invent the process here without any rights. I also need to make people maintainer then, right?
No, the idea is, so there's being a maintainer is one thing, definitely, and then we should make it more clear that how to do this. But the main idea here is, we will document the process, and the process is very open. If you want to take it, you can just take it, but we should make that clear. And usually we want to put someone maintainer if it's someone we trust, because he's been in the community, we knows He does good code reviews and things like this. So we want to bring people up. And that's why you don't need to be a maintainer to do a code review. You can start doing a code review and say, yeah, that looks good for me, or I can ask for many changes. And then based on that, maybe someone else will just double check your code review, but definitely. And that's something I want to introduce is, let's say, Daniel, you raised a PR, and this is what I said on the Slack channel. Well, if you want your PR to go through, maybe you get someone else, not necessarily one of the maintainers or Daniel or Johan to do the code review. You just ask someone, let's say Bartek, someone you know, to do the code review, to do the first code review. And then when he's done it, maybe that should be a priority for Johan, Daniel, or the maintainers, whoever, to actually look at it. And we discussed that with Daniel and Johan today and yesterday. Many of the code reviews is just, well, your build is not passing, so fix your build, and that should get you to the next step. So you can't really say it like this, but the point is, we should be a bit more clear about what we need to accept a PR. The build needs to pass, the test needs to be written, the guideline needs to be followed. So I just want to, so that's a very interesting talk. So I think we agreed, and we already discussed extensively on the Slack channel, so I think we should carry on with this. We have only 5 minutes. I just want to cut this one, and then if there's nothing more to say, oh yeah, there's something very important to say, sorry. One of the top priority now is actually not the PRs and not the contributions. The top priority now is to move the DSC resource modules and repositories from the PowerShell organization to the DSC community organization. And one of the current way the releases have been done and are being done, so Michael's going to do this release, but everyone needs, and all the maintainers need to understand that this is likely to be the last release. And first of all, we've been saying this for now a few months, that we need to move over to the DSC community repository, but now there's new policies within Microsoft, which makes it even more unpractical than it was before. So now is like this week's release is probably the last one being done the old way. And there's a lot to say around what we need to do next. And I've prepared actually a module template. Let me just try to show you quickly. So I have a build process, which we should move all the resource to, and that manages the releases, that manages the GitHub releases, and it creates pre-release, it manages the versionings for you. So everything is built in the module. And we will convert, and I already talked to Daniel and Johan about this. We're going to convert a few, and we're going to improve the documentation, and we will move. We will start moving, but we need the maintainers' help to move to these new principles. And definitely, if you're a maintainer, have a look at this, contact me, and then we will get you on board. And the idea is we just need to move to be able to release new versions. So for the next 6 weeks, definitely start moving your repository to DSC community. We will put documentation up this week, and we will need to make this happen very quickly. So sorry, I just started fast. So what did you say, Johan? Issue finding documentation around how to become community maintainer. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, if you see here, we have a list of maintainers here on the DSC community org website, and there's some information there that we added. If you like to be a maintainer, or you feel you need to stop being a maintainer, so for now you can contact any of us in the committee, or Gail, or whoever in the Slack channel. It's the easiest way. But we can add more documentation around this.
Yep. So stay tuned for the changes as well. I said earlier, like, there's much more information that we need to share that we can fit into this 1 hour slot. I'm still around for a bit this morning, afternoon, whatever it is for you. And but we need to move off to the DSC community. And we need to change the way we release. So the idea is to release, I said it before, release every time there's a merge to master. So then when someone creates a PR, then as soon as the PR is accepted, they can see and take a pre-release from the PowerShell gallery so that they can use their fix. I think that's really important for people working in companies when they spend some time. So I'm gonna, because we're over time now, I'm just gonna stop there. Michael can stop the recording. And then if there's more information to be shared, we can stay on.